All right,
So
I'll take my face off.
we won't talk any politics anymore.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So this is the final session for the Marietta class, and and what we're looking at. I should just remind folks who are looking at this online, and I'll remind you, Joe, is the I'm going to pull up my calendar. Is our in-person sessions. We'll meet at 8 a.m. on Saturday, June 27th at 622 8th Street in Marietta. And we'll do the solar labs all day long that day. And then we'll meet again at the same location on the 28th at 8 a.m. In the morning, we'll review for the exam. We'll break for lunch, and then we'll have the exam. So we should be done by about 2:30 or so. Now, just to facilitate everything, we will provide lunches. So if you read somewhere, because I know sometimes we have that old legacy stuff, we'll provide you the lunches. All you need to do is wear comfortable clothes. Everything that you're going to need is going to be here, and just 622 8th Street, Marietta. Okay, so we'll sort of put a fork in that. All right. Okay, so this week we're going to review chapter 10 through 15. Those later chapters very short. Not a lot on the test. Not a lot really to accommodate there. The chapter 10 is about mounting systems, and one of the issues that we deal with mounting systems is how much space is required for your array. A rough rule of thumb for crystalline panels, silicon panels, is about 10 watts per square foot. So oftentimes you'll get people come to you and they'll say, how much can I put on my roof? What size array can I fit on my roof? And so if you just use that 10 watts per square foot, that includes all your setbacks and everything. So if you've got a roof that's say 20 by 20, that would be 400 square feet. You could put a 4,000 watt solar array, roughly, really roughly. But you run those kind of numbers all the time. What's the south facing roof? How big is it? And then you can sort of give somebody a vague idea. Now, obviously, there are tools that you can use where you can physically lay the panels on that roof. It uses Google Earth, and you can get those things and you can get an exact number. But this will give you a rough idea on just how many. Then the setbacks that you're dealing with, again, it can be complicated, but the things that you want to be aware of is at the peak of the roof, you need to have a 3 foot walking area. Talking residential here. It doesn't have to be 3 foot on one side. It could be 18 inches on the south side where the array is, and then 18 inches on the north side, as long as there's 3 feet. Then you need 3 feet clear distance on each side of the array. So really this is for access for first responders to walk up that. You don't have to have the 3 feet at the eave at the bottom of the array, but it's a good idea to have something. And we typically say about 16 inches and that's more about wind loading, because if it's hanging right at the edge of the roof, the wind, it's going to get caught and it can put stresses on the mounting structure. So really 16 inches at the bottom, 3 feet on the other three sides. Now it can get more complicated than that, but that's all you have to worry about. When we talk about live loads and dead loads, really the live loads are the issue. The dead loads, that's just the shipping weight of your solar array. That's usually going to be 2 to 3 pounds per square foot. That's not very much, less than shingles. Live loads, the wind loading is really the big one. You can get 50 pounds per square foot of lift or press down. It acts like the wing on an airplane. You're going to get a lot of activity there. So those are some of the situations, some of the issues there. And obviously, you're going to want to connect your footers. Ideally, you're going to connect your footers into the rafters so that it's getting a good bite. We used to say that was the only way of doing it, but a lot of these mounting systems now, they'll have a mount with like four lag bolts, smaller lag bolts, and they will allow you to just bolt it into the deck of the roof, but still not great. It's better if you can get a longer lag bolt and put it into the rafter, get that support there. And a lot of good tools. If you haven't done the online Iron Ridge lab, do that just to get a sense of how you design. You know, it's really it's not as complicated as you might think. The different orientations there, you know, flat roof. There's uh, um, I'm losing the term for it, the flush to roof system. You know, that's like a traditional shingle roof, and it's just running at the same pitch orientation of the roof. That's a flush to roof mounted system. There are going to be ballasted systems for flat roofs. Typical ballasted system is going to have either a built-in 5-degree pitch or a 10-degree pitch. More often, or very often now, we're starting to see east-west, where they do them sort of like a pyramid and you face them east and west. One of the advantages of that is you can get more solar panels on a limited space. You don't have to have that inner row shading issue. So that's one reason for it. The downside is there aren't convenient aisleways to walk. So if you've filled up the whole roof, except for those aisles where you can walk, getting to the panels to do maintenance, to deal with wire, that can be a pain. So that's the downside. Ground mounted systems, there's a whole bunch of stuff there. Nothing really difficult in the ground mounted. I would say just make sure you walk through the online Iron Ridge program, and it'll give you a good sense about all the issues there with designing racking systems. Chapter 11 is around designing a standalone system. And really, the components are very different than a grid tied system. You need to have a standalone inverter. It's completely different than a grid tied inverter, except for the fact that it converts from DC to AC. But with a grid tied inverter, we're typically dealing with voltage ranges. Its startup voltage is say 80 volts. Its maximum is going to be 600 volts because those are the maximum limitation for by the NEC for residential. But for a grid tie or an off-grid system or a standalone system, really the inverter has to match the voltages of the battery bank. So typically, we're dealing with 48 volt batteries if we're in the world of lead acid. It could be different with lithium ion. And lithium ion batteries, you want to make sure that it's compatible with your inverter. And often we're dealing with proprietary systems. So if you're dealing with an N phase system, you're going to have an N phase battery. If you're dealing with a different type of system, it may be agnostic, but it will give you a listing of the battery companies that it's compatible with. So you just want to make sure that it's compatible. So that's one of the issues. Charge controllers. There is a thing in the world of charge controllers, and this is really lead based or lead acid battery technology. But we have what we call the MPPT charge controller. It's a terrible name for it. MPPT is the maximum power point tracking device, which is really keeping your solar panel operating at its sweet spot. We call that charge controller MPPT. I don't know, just marketing, but it has nothing to do with the MPPT. They're in almost all charge controllers, regardless. What it is it's a buck boost charge controller. Voltage can come in at one voltage and leave at a different voltage. Usually it comes in at a higher voltage and leaves at whatever the voltage is of your battery bank. And the reason for that is then you can design your system so that you could run up to 600 volts coming from your solar array, and then your charge controller is going to step it down to 48 volts so that it charges your battery. That will save you a lot of money on wire because you don't have to have big wire because you're not operating at 48 volts from the array to the charge controller. So that's one of the reasons why we have it. And almost all of those systems now incorporate that buck boost or DC to DC voltage conversion charge controller. So the old days of having a 48 volt nominal charge controller with 48 volt nominal panels and a 48 volt nominal battery, those days are gone. But and that's good because it was an expensive way to do it. I would say in here too, one of the confusing things is on page 314, 315, we get into how do you size your array. And when we're doing sizing of array, let me grab my whiteboard here. And just as a bit of a refresher, I'm going to hit, whoops, clicked on the wrong thing. More whiteboard. There we go. All right. So how do we do it with a grid tied system? How do we size our array? Well, typically what you're going to do, oh, that's right. I got to move this over to this screen. All right. So typically what we do is we take our daily load. So you're going to usually get your monthly load. So let's say it's 900 kilowatt hours per month, and we just get that off the electric bill. We divide this, I'm just going to say 30 days per month. Just normally I do 30.5, but just to get us to 30 kilowatt hours per day. All right, so that gives us a clean, easy number. Now, how do we size the array? Well, we look up in PV watts and we find out how many hours of insolation at that site, and at that angle and at that azimuth. So we look that up on PV watts, and let's just say we get 4.5 hours per day. Well, hours per day cancel out. We're going to take 30, grabbing my calculator, 30 divided by 4.5, and it gives us 6.67. 6.67 kilowatts. That would be the size of the array if it were 100% efficient, but it's not. So let's say we do our D rating and we find out that this system is 92% efficient. So there's 8% derated. So I would divide that by 0.92 and I get 7.25 more or less. 7.25. If you get a larger number or a smaller number, then you did it backwards. You multiplied it times its D rate value because obviously it doesn't make any sense. If you can't use all the power that it's generating, you shouldn't need a smaller system. You need a bigger system. So in this case, this is how we figured it out. And we did it based on an annualized average because we're net metering, because we're connected to the grid. You know, if we have extra power, we send it to the grid. If we need power, we pull it from the grid. So we're just working with averages. But if you look at page 314, you can see that you can chart month by month what is the solar installation. You get that off of PV watts. And what is that month's load demand? And when we divide those, we get a design ratio. So essentially what we're looking for is what is the worst case scenario where we have which month is giving us the worst case scenario between how much power we're using and how much power is available in the form of sunlight. And then we're going to design our system for the worst case because, you know, with a standalone system, you need power when you need it. We don't care about maximizing the amount we're generating because what good does it do you if you have the capacity of overproducing in August, but you don't have enough power to run your stuff in December? You know, you're not going to store stuff for 6 months. So, and if we're overproducing, typically the solar panels are just going to be sitting there not generating anything. They're fine to sit in the sun and not do anything. Let's say you don't have any loads and your battery is full. Solar array is just sitting there doing nothing, even though it has the capacity to generate power. So we're using the design ratio. So typically our solar array is going to be larger if we have a standalone system, because it's for the worst case scenario, not the average scenario. And we could even take it on a granular basis to which is the worst day, but that would get crazy. And you don't have that data typically available to you. There is on page 317 a formula on how you design lead acid batteries. It can be complicated. You know, you're basically going to go through a number of steps that involve what is the daily load, what's the voltage of the battery. Then we divide that by the inverter inefficiency, because the inverter is the only thing that gets between the battery and the load. And then we have to know how many days of autonomy we want, what's the depth of discharge. And that's kind of a long process. You're not going to be asked a question like that on the test because that's kind of old technology. Today's technology, what we're dealing with is if you need a battery, right? What's your daily load? 30 kilowatt hours? All right, you need a 30 kilowatt hour battery. That's how lithium ion batteries are rated. So if I want 1 day of autonomy, I need 30 kilowatt hours. Well, I go out and look at a Tesla Powerwall and maybe it's 10 kilowatt hours. So I need 3 of them. It's pretty straightforward. Not a lot of math involved. A lot of money involved, but not a lot of math. Most people don't need a full day, especially if they're grid tied, of autonomy, because when your power goes out, it's only going to be a short period of time, and you're probably not going to be running all your loads. So I think those are kind of the highlights there in chapter 11 about standalone. It may be, I guess there's a concept known as ripple. And ripple might not be something that's totally intuitive to you. That's on page 324. And essentially, the thing to remember is that all electricity travels in a circuit. So if we're going from AC to DC, it has to come back to DC, or from DC to AC, and then from AC to DC to run the whole circuit by the time it gets back to the battery. So what happens is that flat line is, well, it's probably easier if I again share the whiteboard. And if we're running from a let's say this is our battery and we're just going to connect to an inverter, and I want to just demonstrate the circuit, and let's say it goes to a load out here, make a light bulb. All right, we're going to have a flat line. That's the DC waveform. Then we're going to have a sine wave for AC. It's going to return back to the inverter in a sine wave, terrible sine wave. And then it should come in a flat wave back DC circuit. But there's going to be a little bit of an echo. It's not 100% flat. And that's known as ripple. And the ripple on that can cause you problems. So that's just something. How do you solve for ripple? Well, we talk about it, but bigger wire is usually, a real help in these things. And what's the problem with ripple? Well, it's going to wear out some of your loads. If you think about it, the voltage is going up and down just slightly, but then that means the amps are going up and down slightly to maintain the same level of power. So if you've got a motor on it, you're going to hear that little it's going, and that just causes wear and tear on the equipment. So you can get rid of ripple by installing capacitors and things like that, but it's usually it says that you installed too small of a battery bank. That can be a problem. Or it's undercharged. It's almost dead. That can cause a problem. The cables are either too long or not big enough. and you may have some low quality switches, fuses, things of that nature. So it really is make your stuff bigger, make things bigger. You're going to solve that problem. Pretty straightforward. All right. Then we jump into chapter 12, job site safety. No one cares about safety, so never mind, right? I didn't say that. Okay, so safety issues, a lot of information there. Uh, Personal protective devices, you know, safety harnesses, things of that nature. We talk about um, the hard hats, the different classes of hard hats. I guess one of the areas that people sometimes get a little bit confused about is placement of a ladder. The ladder, we do a 1-to-4 ratio. So if it's 12 feet before it connects to the ladder touches the edge of the building. If it's 12 feet up, it should be 3 feet back. Sometimes that feels a little bit tight. Feels like the ladder's too vertical, at least for me it does. And I usually fudge it back just a little bit. You can usually tell if the ladder's at the right angle. With new ladders, they're going to have, the rungs on the ladder are not round. They're flat where you're going to be walking. And if those are laying level, then you've got the angle of the ladder at the right angle. You're also supposed to extend the ladder 3 feet above. So if you're climbing up onto the roof, there should be 3 feet that you can hold on to as you climb out over the ladder or on the side of the ladder. It just gives you a handhold. It should be secured at the top and the bottom. This is easy to do or relatively easy to do if you've got just one access point, you set it up. Obviously, if you're cleaning out the gutters, very few people secure the ladder every time they climb up. Or like I'm doing right now, I'm doing some painting on the house next door. Yeah, every time I move it, I'm not going to re-secure it. So there's a 3-point climbing technique. The 3-point climbing technique basically means that you're not allowed to have anything in your hands. That's what tool belts are for and things of that nature. So you always have 3 points of contact with the ladder: 2 hands, 1 foot, or 2 feet, 1 hand. As you're climbing up the ladder, you're always maintaining 3 points of contact. That's a big deal. Another thing that people somewhat lose track of is there is a color coding for ladders, and an easy way of remembering that is I always just tell people to remember sorry, red, green, BOY, Reg Boy. So that's going to be red, green, blue, orange, yellow. And it got a little bit confusing because it used to be we only had red, green, and blue. So this was known as type 1. This was known as type 2. And this was type 3. And blue was rated for 250 pounds, 225, and 200. And that's what we had. But then Americans discovered McDonald's, got fatter. So then they went type 1A, and that was then rated for 300 pounds. And then they discovered drive-through windows, and it was type 1AA, and that was 375 pounds. Now, if you ever used a yellow ladder, they can be pretty heavy. And of course, you want all these to be fiberglass. The reason for fiberglass is then if they come in contact with an electrical conductor, you're not going to get electrocuted, in theory. So that's how color coding works. And so that's something to remember from the safety chapter. Lockout, tagout, you should be familiar with that. Then we jump into chapter 13. And I will just tell you, chapters 13, 14, and 15, there's very little, if anything, on the exam. But you should be familiar with the paperwork, interconnection agreement, net metering agreements. These are things that you have with the utility. One-line drawings, there's good example of a one-line drawing there on page 352. When you submit for an electrical permit, to get your system installed, they're going to want to see a one-line drawing. If you provide them with something like the one on page 352, they're going to be very impressed. They're also going to want to know, they're going to want to see a site plan. And that site plan, like a bird's eye view, it's plan view. Really, you can just take a snapshot from Google Earth and just overprint on it. I just use Microsoft Paint or whatever. Take the Google Earth image and then just say, okay, this is where it's going to be. This is where all the stuff is. That's something they just want to know. They want to know, are you violating any right of ways? Are you getting too close to the neighbor's property? Where is all this stuff going to be located? And then the rest of that chapter talks about labels and all the labels that are supposed to be installed in the system. I will tell you that we almost never see that done properly. So if you follow the rules that are outlined in that chapter, you're going to be ahead of the curve because you're going to be installing a system in the proper way. And then the rest of the chapters are always all about commissioning. These are things that you're typically going to, as an entry level person, you're not going to be doing that. If you're doing your own system, well, then you're going to be following the manufacturer's instructions because every system is going to be a little bit different. This chapter just gives you some broad guidelines as to what you should look for. I think that's pretty much everything. I think we've touched on it. Do you have, I know Joe, you're on there. Do you have any questions? Because this is going to be our last get together before we get together in person. So any questions?
I know. I don't know how. I've been trying to learn it. I'm going through it, so I'm looking forward to getting the training. Since I'm just doing it for my own purposes, I just always kind of felt like I was auditing a class. So, is there any reason why I should take the test on Sunday? I plan on being there for Saturday for sure, just so I can get the experience. But does it benefit you in any way if I take the test on Sunday? Or is it just for my purposes? If I,
It's
um,
for your benefit. If you want to, if you decide, listen, I'm not that interested in it, like you're just saying. Um, if you change your mind in the future because you've already done the class, the lecture portion by doing the online, and you've done the hands-on, you can arrange to take the test remotely through ETA, just from your own laptop, at some future date. If you're, because it's not a do it when on that weekend, or you're never going to have another chance.
okay, good, because I'm very interested in doing this for myself, but I don't plan on trying to enter the industry
Right.
professionally. So,
Yeah, well, you're certainly welcome to take the test, but if you don't want to, if your flight arrangements or your travel is easier, if you don't, that's fine too.
okay, all right, thank you.
Sure. All right. Okay, well, I think that's it. So, just to remind everybody that again, it's June 27th and 28th in Marietta at 622 8th Street, and we will see you then, and look forward to meeting you all in person.
Me too. Take care.
All right. Bye bye.